Welcome to another episode of Exploring the Vintage NFT Space with ZeroG. Today I'm excited to have with me Goatishduck, who is one of the longtime NFT Relic members. We're going to be discussing uh, Etheria and a couple other things. So thanks for joining me, Goatish.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. I mean, you're probably outside of the founder, you're probably one of the people most familiar with the intricacies of Etheria, which is a very complicated project, and really groundbreaking on Ethereum. But before we jump into that, why don't we just briefly touch in your background and what was what actually motivated you to, or when did you first hear about crypto?
Uh, sure, yeah. So my background is I'm an old guy and and I've been doing computer stuff since the 80s. And so majored in computer science and got a PhD in computer science. So I'm kind of a big time computer nerd. And even back in I guess as it relates to NFTs and things like that, even back in the 80s when I had my first PC, I was making little kind of PFP projects where you'd create a character and then you'd enter a bunch of data for oh, the color of their hat and the color of their shirt, and then it would generate a bunch of different characters with different attributes. And so yeah, in terms of playing around with computers, I go way back. And in as an undergrad in grad school, I studied AI and a bit of cryptography and things like that. And I I had heard about cryptocurrency and blockchains. I was familiar with them, but I didn't really get serious about them until 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when the NFT boom happened, that's when I was like, oh, this is really fun because it did remind me of the stuff I did when I was a kid. And so I don't
Mhm.
know, there was something just really fun about it, and it really captured my attention.
Well,
Um,
that's a really fascinating background. I mean, especially being, studying cryptography and AI stuff back then, again, air quotes, before it was cool, is like that's a really unique background and perspective to be coming into this with.
yeah, I think I see all of this a little bit differently than other people because of all that background.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe I appreciate it in a little bit different way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely interesting. Um, so you, I guess, kind of got the interest after 2021. So, what actually made you like take the leap and make your first purchase?
Um, I don't know. Let's see. I guess yeah. All right. Well, the key thing is that I need to mention that I was very naive, as most people are when they start out. I didn't know anything. And so it's kind of embarrassing talking about like what I decided to do and why I decided to do it. So the first thing I bought was a CryptoPunk, and it was just because it was like, oh, these things are sort of seems like this is being hyped as kind of like the top project. And I come from the professional poker world. I did that for a while, and I
Oh,
noticed
cool.
that like some of these poker guys were buying CryptoPunks and trying to sort of make it into a big thing. And so I was like, okay, I'll buy one NFT. I'll get a CryptoPunk, and that'll be my cool crypto flex thing that I get. So I bought a CryptoPunk without really knowing anything. Just like people told me that this is the cool thing to get. And then a couple months went by and the prices just skyrocketed. And it was like, oh, wait a second. Like now this thing's like six figures. I don't know if this makes sense anymore. I thought I was just gonna hold it forever and just have it, but it just got to be worth a lot of money. And then I was like, I think I'll just sell this because I don't really know what I'm doing. So trading a CryptoPunk was one of my earliest experiences in this NFT world, and a lot of that was just luck. But I mean, that was cool. I was able to sort of get in and out. Um, and around that time, another thing I was thinking, so I didn't want to buy too many NFTs because it was already sort of the middle of a bubble, it felt like. It was like, well, I don't want to buy when things are at the high. So my wife and I decided to create our own NFTs and try to sell them because I figured, well, selling is better than buying in, mid 2021. So we tried to do something kind of unique. Like instead of just having pictures, we decided to make entire chatbots as NFTs. So we made this romantic partner chatbots called Hot Bodies, and it was a set of 40 chatbots that they are still there on OpenSea, and you can actually chat with them, and there's a whole routine and everything. And this was like before people really got into ChatGPT and all that, so it was a little bit of foreshadowing of what was to come. So we made these chatbot NFTs, and they did okay. We sold some of them, um, but the thing is, while I was doing all this, I started to think, I started to get a little smarter about things, and I was realizing that like, wait a second, there's really an infinite supply of NFTs here, and they don't cost that much to make.
Yeah.
And you start to at first you don't see it, but then you're like, like yeah, you can make an NFT project and you can release it, but like, of course, the teams with the huge marketing budgets are going to win. Like, that's how this works, right? You don't just, you could make a great NFT, but like, it just doesn't matter. It's like, it's all about marketing. So, like, this thought started to creep into my mind that, like, wait a second, there must be such a thing as an earliest NFT. Like there must be such a thing as like digging up old ones. And of course, that's where you can get scarcity and that's where you can get real value. And so I sort of arrived at this idea on my own and then started looking around. And of course, there was already this relics community, NFT relics Discord, as well as other places at the time where people were hunting for old NFTs. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And that was sort of the start of a multi-year journey, um, really focusing on the old stuff, the not infinite supply stuff. And
It's
so, yeah.
it's really a like to your story, like it's really when you understand it, it really clicks though that I mean, and is that point has gotten even more stark now is that before it was still like there was still like you still had to pay someone like in Fiverr or whatever if you wanted to create a low effort like NFT project. And again, like there were still meaningful fees to mint, but now we have essentially zero gas on all the main chains now because of usage is dead. And now we have these AI tools that will basically create infinite content for essentially free too. I mean the barrier to entry for creating new NFTs is it really is basically zero now.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. So then it just comes down to marketing and which I have absolutely no interest.
Well, I remember having that same realization though. I was like, wait. So like in the middle of that bubble with all the PFP projects and everything, I was like, wait, so like there's nothing stopping people from creating infinite 10K projects and like obviously this is going to end badly. I didn't obviously none of us could predict exactly when, but of course it all came crumbling down. So but it's been an interesting it's been interesting watching this all, through the perspective of someone who focuses on the historic collections.
Yeah, yeah, and so it became kind of obvious to me that I should be looking at the older stuff. But then I was still naive about another thing. I had felt like, well, okay, there's a relics community, there's people looking for these older projects. So I figured, well, there must be like hundreds of geeks that have like scoured the blockchain, figured everything out, and now I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna grab some of the oldest um, NFTs and collect them. And I thought it was all figured out. So I
Yeah.
looked around and people would say like buy this or that NFT, like, oh, how about Ether Lambos? They say that's okay. I didn't buy one of those, but that's the kind of thing. You just look around, you see people talking about a project, and you're like, well, I guess they figured out that this is one of the great old projects, so maybe I'll buy one of these. Um, and so I stumbled around for a little bit at the beginning before I realized that there really weren't too many people like really looking at the blockchain. And like there were people that called themselves archaeologists, of course, but they weren't doing what I would call archaeology, which is like actually downloading the data, going through it, like really, just inspecting it very carefully. They were just kind of looking at old Reddit posts and maybe checking Etherscan and things like that. But the real hardcore archaeology was not being done. And it took me a while to see that. Um, and when I realized that it wasn't being done, it was very exciting. It was like, oh, wow, there's actually stuff left to be discovered, and there's a lot of misconceptions here. And so things got a lot more fun when I started to see that.
Yeah, and you were really open about it too. I remember I hit you up when you were starting to dig into that, and one of the tools out there you were highlighting was in Google BigQuery they have the entire Ethereum blockchain like loaded as a data set that you can do analytics on. Of course, this is for GCP's benefit because the way BigQuery works, they charge you to run to compute time to run these queries, but anyway, I thought I played around with that a little bit myself and I didn't get very far with it, but I thought that was cool. You weren't trying to, hoard information or anything like that. Again, like anyone could have done this.
Yeah, there was just kind of a natural barrier to entry in that, like,
Mhm.
you had to put in the time and be willing to, pay to query. I probably paid $1,000 running queries, but in the end, it was worth it. I found stuff.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it was really a once in a lifetime kind of situation where you see like, wow, there's this wide open, like territory to explore, could be important, and it's quite unexplored, and yeah, it led to a few exciting years of figuring things out, discovering things, building my collection, helping to educate people on what's there on Ethereum. Um, and yeah, it's been a ton of fun. I feel very grateful to have had the experience that I've had so far.
Yeah, and I guess before we jump into talking about Etheria, I think it'd be fair to mention that, you dug up some cool stuff on your own through your own research, like AA coin is a fun one, which is one of the first tokens, even predating Mist on, like again in like the again when Ethereum was so young, like the cost to deploy and all the stuff was essentially free. So no one was using testnet for anything, right? So everyone was deploying on mainnet. So you're basically finding these. So AA coin was like again one of the first tokens um, on Ethereum that you found. Um,
Yeah, that I mean that's was one of the most fun discoveries. Contract number 365, unverified uh code, like it's just byte code, so it's really hard for people to find. You really had to dig, but it turns out that that is the first coin with a name and a distribution mechanism, really the first like meme coin launch that ever happened. And it remained a kind of buried digital treasure for 9 years. So in my opinion, one of, if not the greatest stories, relating to blockchain collectibles. So I was really happy to have been a part of that.
yeah, it's been fun, kind of watching that play out, over the past year or so. Um, But one of the things I really appreciated is your again, like uh, you really seem to click with and really dig into Etheria as a project. I know that I first learned about Etheria when during the rediscovery in 2021, I guess it was, when a bunch of punks in the punks Discord like rediscovered it and started going through and claiming all of these tiles. There was a mad rush, and I had never used um, I had never interacted directly with the contract, so I was completely SOL there. And at the time, and during that bubble, for a little bit, the I think the floor price of the Ethereum 1.2, it was either like 40 or 60 ETH for a while. I mean, it was the most probably the highest floor for a non-crypto punk um, collection out there. I know people traded punks for tiles back then. So, anyways, just definitely a really wild time for back in the early NFT rediscovery days. So, when did you first hear about Etheria?
Um, I guess probably late 2021 when I was in the NFT Relics Discord, people would talk about it. I mean, it was
Mhm.
already, yeah, I kind of missed the
Mhm.
whole rediscovery part, but yeah, people would talk about it, and I had this sort of vague awareness that like, oh, I guess this is like the first one. Um, but the thing is, like, it's there's so much to it. There's multiple
Yeah.
versions,
Well,
and
yeah, I just realized, like, I think it's probably more fair for our audience to take a step back. And why don't you just describe what Etheria is on a high level before we like jump into the details and all that stuff? Because it is truly a remarkable project.
sure, yeah. So Etheria is a project from 2015. Cyrus Adkisson created Etheria like right after the Ethereum blockchain was launched, and it's a super ambitious project. What he was trying to do was make a basically like a metaverse that is, a trustless metaverse that can never be shut down. You've got like it's you own a piece of land. There's these parcels of land that have XY coordinates and they have elevations, and you can own one. And not only can you own it, but you can do things with it, like give it a name, you can update its status, and then the most interesting thing is you can actually build sculptures on the land. So you can farm your tile, you own a tile and you farm it for blocks, and then you put the blocks together, you make a sculpture, and there's all kinds of interesting constraints um, with regards to what you can make, and we can get into all the details. But yeah, in the end, it basically the way I like to describe it is it's like a 3D sculpture park where you can own a piece, you can own some of the land in this 3D sculpture park and do whatever you want with it. And it's it's wild when I think about it. It's a huge deal. It's like Ethereum when Ethereum was launched, this was sort of the birth of the world computer. This was you had Bitcoin where it was a solution to the consensus problem. So you have a network of nodes and you could have malicious actors and failures and everything, but you all have to come to an agreement about a set of facts. And with Bitcoin, the the facts are sort of like who owns what in terms of coins, like
It
what's
all comes back to UTXOs essentially. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so that was like the big breakthrough, though, is that like we have a way to all agree on something, um, in a peer-to-peer distributed way. And so that's Bitcoin. And then a few years later, Vitalik Buterin comes up with this idea for Ethereum, which is like a generalization of Bitcoin, where we're not just going to agree on an ownership ledger for coins, we're going to agree on the state of an ongoing computation. So we're going to have this world computer, a single threaded computer that just goes step by step slowly, and everyone can reach agreement in terms of where we're at in the computation. And so it just opens up a world of possibility. Now you can program this world computer. Um, and yeah, like I said, Etheria was this ambitious attempt to sort of build a toy or a fun experience, like a Minecraft-like kind of thing on the world computer. Um, and and the key thing is that it's the first time you have something like that where it can't be shut down. Nobody can take your stuff. You can have a tile, build a sculpture on it, and then know that like your grandkids will be able to look at that sculpture. And
I
that's
mean,
like wild when I think about it. It's a really big deal.
yeah, one thing that like I'm always in awe of whenever I think about Etheria is that again, this is just, this is the same year that like the mainnet launched and went live, and the first like meaningful like tokenized collectible project, like what NFT project is something so ambitious and complicated and impressive, instead of something really lame like a Hello World or I don't know, it's really wild. Like again, it's still really remarkable. I don't think we've still seen anything, or I'm not familiar with anything that's um like quite as impressive to me. And this is 2025 on Ethereum. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's one way I think about it is Etheria is it's kind of like the ultimate demo. It's like, okay, we've got Ethereum, let's push it to its limits. Let's see what it can do. Try out all the functionality and everything. And so it's sort of like an embodiment of the world computer. It's like both like there's good aspects and also some bad aspects. There's little quirks in there, like the reentrancy attack that that sort of in 2016 when they figured out like that there was a bug and there was a reentrancy attack on the DAO and all that. Like Etheria is susceptible to that.
mhm.
Not anymore, because that's all been fixed and everything. But I guess what I'm saying is like so much of Ethereum is baked into Etheria, and you can learn about all of the quirks of the world computer by studying Etheria, and that's just really cool. I think that makes it sort of like in my opinion, like the Grail project of that blockchain.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that's interesting for collectors too. So, in like this project was presented at DevCon back in 2015 as well. As far as obviously the only NFT project that was presented there, and you know, it's it it's just the other thing that again that is remarkable for it being the first project on Ethereum is that again it wasn't just a lame hello world like I'm testing deploying contracts. The other thing is that it kept a reasonable supply for on the contract too. So again, so it's not like there's 10,000 or 100,000 plots that you can buy, or 100, a billion. It could have been anything, right? But there's less than 1,000 plots on each contract, so there's a meaningful amount of scarcity there.
Yeah, I would say like in terms of like the Hello World, I would say II coin is a little bit more like the Hello World. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's take a coin, we'll add a faucet to it, and it's like it's beautiful in its simplicity.
Hmm.
But then Etheria is like a whole other beast. It's just like, okay, let's make something like very rich. Um, and yeah, it's really special.
Well, I guess we can jump into some more of the details. I guess I just say at a high level, like I mentioned earlier, like at this point in Ethereum, almost no one was developing and deploying. So essentially, the cost to deploy on mainnet was almost free, right? In USD terms. So all of the development was done on mainnet. So there were a ton of different contracts that were deployed as Ethereum was being developed, and many of those ended up being killed later on. But we're left with four surviving tradable versions at this point.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that's another important thing to mention is that Etheria is special in that the entire history of development of the project is on chain. And you can't say that about, well, yeah, you can't say that about the newer projects because people use the test net for that. But because everything was cheap, you've got, I don't know, 50 to 100, something like that, um, sort of drafts of Etheria. And they were, even though they were technically killed, you still have all the code there. So you can trace the development of the whole project, even though
Yeah,
you've got all these.
it's
Mhm.
still there for like for all eternity on Ethereum. You just can't interact with it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really cool. And there's actually a fun fact related to that in that well, we'll get into this in more detail, but I take great care to figure out exactly what you can verify and what you can't verify on chain. And one thing you can't verify about Ethereum is its name. Like if you look at the four working contracts, so there's four versions that are working, you won't find the word Etheria anywhere in there. Like they got compiled to bytecode, and the name Etheria doesn't go into the bytecode. But one fun fact is that like one of the earlier drafts, just by mistake, one of the functions was named Etheria, and it wasn't made into a constructor function. So the constructor functions sort of get thrown away. So if you call it Etheria, it doesn't matter. But I think by mistake, a different function got named Etheria. So Etheria kind of did make its way onto the blockchain. So we kind of know the project is named Etheria because we can look at one of the early drafts and find that word there. Um, and so yeah, it's just it's kind of wild. Like,
Yeah,
once you really dig in and start researching this.
yeah, and we have, if I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have, doesn't Cyrus still have the original Solidity code that he used to deploy these?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I don't know about all the drafts and everything, but
Hmm.
for the four working versions, there's been yeah, they've all been verified in terms of like
Yeah, yeah,
we know that there is code out there that compiles to the bytecode that's on the blockchain.
yeah, yeah, which is, again, which is cool because there's a ton of these old projects that will probably never be verified and we'll never have the source code for.
Uh, yeah, that's right. It's nice to have the source code. It's yeah, and it's provides some comfort in terms of like it's a lot easier to read and follow along in terms of like figuring out what this thing actually does. I mean, in theory, you can directly read the bytecode with the just like push and pop from the stack and move data from here to there and add these two numbers together. Like, yeah, you can technically figure out what's going on, but it's better to just have source code.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so again, like you said, we had like an enormous amount of drafts that were, again, you can see you look up the activity from Cyrus's account, you can see all these different, deployments. So we have the kind of like the breadcrumbs throughout the development of Etheria. We have like what ended up being in retrospect the first version that was I guess immutable and also like able to be traded securely ended up being zero point 0.9. Um, and in zero point 0.9 it also had most of the major functions too, which is again like the ability to to build and place you know place the blocks on the map, or I shouldn't say map, on the tiles, right?
Yeah, so Etheria v0.9 is the first working version, and not only is it working, but like yeah, you can do all of the stuff. Like there's no major problems there. So you can name your tile, you can build on it. Everything was there in 0.9.
Oh, I guess I'd throw out one more thing that I guess I hadn't mentioned yet too, is that not only, so again, this was so early in the in all of Ethereum that there wasn't like there's no marketplace or standard way to interact with collectibles. Like there is a marketplace built into Ethereum itself in order to allow people to securely trade and exchange tiles, right? Because there was no other way, like there were no third party services to rely upon or build upon or standards to build upon. This is what it was. So again, that's also a really cool feature as well.
Yeah, yeah, there's a whole complicated in the first two versions, there's a very complicated system of making offers and then accepting offers on tiles and stuff. And yeah, that was the first time anyone had ever done something like that.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that is not really well known, and you've kind of touched on it, is that originally when it was deployed, the idea was that you would there's a one of the contracts allows you to farm blocks, and then you use these blocks to build on and or to create structures on your plot, right? Um, can you want to like kind of walk through the history or and the use of this like building mechanic and I guess talk about now where we're like we've kind of shifted to a different mechanism for what's displayed now in the on the official Etheria builder and viewer.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot to this, and
Hmm.
it goes back to like I said, my view is that the stuff that's verifiable on chain, like the original sort of stuff that's really in the bytecode of the contract, is what is most important.
Yeah.
And then there's other stuff that's sort of beyond that.
Hmm.
So like for example, if you go to etheria.world right now, that's Cyrus's website where he provides an interface to Etheria. And as you said, there's a new way to do building. So if you go to that site, you'll see the land and you'll see all these structures on the land, these really elaborate 3D sculptures. And those would not have been possible. Those couldn't have been built using the original building mechanics. And so there's a whole new way that people have been um, using the project. They've been sort of creating the 3D structure offline and then shoving it into the name field. Okay, so it's just this
Hmm.
huge string in the name field that represents a 3D build, and then you can look at it on the website. And so that's sort of that, and I'll get into the old way of building,
Sure.
but that's like a streamlined, efficient way of building stuff on your tile, and people like that, and they've built a lot of things, um, and that's fine. In my opinion, that's fine. It's permissionless. You can use any contract any way you want, but it is important to know that that's different from what it originally was. I mean, this is like you're essentially putting data in the name field and then looking at it. Um, the so the originally like the way building worked was like a lot more constrained, and I think that even though it's clunky and you wouldn't really want to use it now because it would be expensive and awkward. It's part of the charm of the project is that this functionality was there from the beginning. So the way building used to work, or I mean the way it still works.
Technically, you could still interact with it if you wanted
Yeah,
to, right? Yeah.
this is still officially the way to build, even though people do this other new stuff. So the official way to build is, first you don't even have building blocks to start with. So you buy a tile and you have it, and you have no blocks to build with. And so what am I even talking about when I say blocks? Well, there's like this like auxiliary contract that has these shapes in it. There's like poles that stand up, or like a line that's laying down, or a L shape, or whatever. There's at least in version 0.9, there's 32 different types of building blocks.
Yeah, think of it like for listeners, think about it as like Tetris pieces in 3D, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Except everything is hexagon shaped because your tile is shaped like a hexagon, and so and then like the building spaces within the tile are like little mini hexagons. And so all these blocks are sort of like hexagon tiles all glued together. Every block is like eight hexagon tiles arranged in some contiguous configuration. Um, so you've got these 32 types of blocks, and then you can call this function called farm tile, and you can't at least most of what I'm mostly going to talk about version 0.9 because that's what I've studied in the most detail, but like some things changed with future versions. But so in 0.9, you could farm your tile like about every 4,000 blocks. So you could do one farm and then you'd have to wait about a day and you could farm it again. And when you farm it, you get 10 pseudo-random blocks. So you're just given like, it's like, oh, I got an L shape or one of the curved ones or whatever. You get what you get, and it's based on the Ethereum block hash. So you
And
call the function and it gives you back a random set. Yep.
and you get that for free just for interacting with the spending the gas to interact with it once it's available to farm, right?
Yeah, you just have to pay gas. And I should point out, and this is very important, that there's no real randomness here, and that's the case for most of these projects on Ethereum. You don't say give me something random and then it gives it back to you because like we don't have like it's hard to achieve that on with blockchain computing. So what you're actually doing is you're saying, um, give me blocks that are based on the this hash that I'm not going to know in advance. But you can kind of cheat because you could like send out a transaction and have it fail if you don't get back the stuff you want. And so you could just like send a transaction. Oh no, I failed. I didn't get the L-shaped block. Send another transaction and
Yeah,
fail. Like it's not really like
yeah. Well,
random. It's just unknown in advance. Let's put it that way.
yeah, to your point, like the like a truly random number generator is exceptionally hard to create, and that's one of the things that I think they're just now starting to be able to deploy with. I think that's one of the only existing use cases for quantum computers is that you can make provably random number generators. I mean, it sounds silly, but it is important for a lot of fields.
Oh yeah, of course. It's yeah, getting getting random numbers. Yeah, that's something people spend their whole lives studying is how to achieve like true randomness in different settings. So yeah, but it's kind of a misconception, I think, in people's heads that like, oh, there's like generative art on Ethereum where you know it was random what you ended up with. Well, not exactly. It's more there's a little
Yeah, to
more.
your point, you're basically having to create very creative um, constructs or approximations or mechanisms to like to obfuscate how you're getting, creating it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so, but anyway, whatever. Pseudo random. It's you
Yeah,
know it doesn't really matter that much in you know in terms as far as this project is concerned.
for an end user that's just interacting with the contract that's not a computer science grad like yourself, it's going to be random enough.
Sure, sure. And in the last two versions, so with respect to farming, in the last two versions of Etheria, it was changed to be non-random because I guess it was like too annoying to just like not get the building blocks you wanted, and so Cyrus changed it to where you can just pick whatever ones you want. But in the earlier versions, it was kind of like a pseudo-random kind of thing. So anyway, you farm your tile, you get your 10 blocks, and one another thing to note is that farming is irreversible. Once you have those blocks, you can't unhave them. Okay, so there's a certain
Oh,
permanence here.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's all these little things that people don't talk about, but I love the idea of permanence with NFTs. And so like if you farm your tile, that's very special because there's only, you know, 1,000 something, tiles that can ever be farmed and they can be farmed once and that's it. I mean they can be farmed multiple times, but I mean it's like you can't put the blocks back away once you have.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Since gas is so low, I might have to give that a shot.
Okay, but you know, then you do run into this like am I decreasing the value of my tile because now it's, you know, I've
It's not a pure, unstained, unfarmed tile.
exactly, exactly. So, but that's what's so cool about this. You have to make that choice, you know. Um, so you farm your tile, you get your 10 blocks, and then you have them, and so the position is set to like the XY position is 0 and the Z position is -1. And -1 just indicates that like the block hasn't been placed yet. Like I haven't done anything with it yet. And then there's a whole other variable, like another field of the tile structure called occupado, which actually keeps track of like what spots in 3D space are taken up by a block. Okay, so that's all empty. So when you farm, you get a bunch of blocks. They're at position -1, Z position -1. They're not taking up any space. They're just there to be used for building. Then anytime you want to build something, you would call the edit block function, and you would say like, okay, I want to take my fifth block that I have in my collection of blocks, and I want to place it at XY position 2, 3, and Z position 0 or whatever. So I give it an XYZ position, and I give it a color as well. So a color is a number between something like -127 and 128 or something. There's 256 different color values. And so you use that function to place a single block. Okay. And you can just call that over and over again, and you can place these individual blocks to form a structure. And I should point out they can't be unplaced. So once it's on your tile, it can be moved around, but it can't be taken off the tile again. All right. So that's another thing that's
That's
irreversible.
that's actually pretty cool too. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you keep adding these blocks, um but there are constraints. You can't just place blocks anywhere, so for example, there's a constraint that like you can't have overlap of the blocks, right? You have a block somewhere, you can't have another block that's like where it's taking up the same space. And there's a little bit of a glitch where like you can't even overlap with yourself. So if you have a block and you want to move it like one space over, it won't work because you're still sort of overlapping where you were before.
Yeah,
So it's like clunky.
the existing space that it is occupying.
Yeah, so you have to take the block and like move it far away and then move it back. It's like a two-step process. So there's that. There's like a gravity type constraint where your block has to either be touching the ground, like so Z value of 0, or it has to be on top of or sort of hanging off of another block. Otherwise, it'll just fail. Like you won't be able to place it. And there's another glitch there. Like if you want to have a block hanging in the air, you can build some scaffolding, place the block, and then take away the scaffolding, and then you've got a block hanging in the air. Um, so yeah, these are some of the constraints. And it's just wild when you look at the code. It's like, man, this was like a lot going on. Like for such an early project to like put in all these interesting constraints. It's really something. And it took forever for me to dig through all this code.
Yeah, again, every time I think about it, I'm always impressed at um just how complicated and ambitious this was for, I guess another thing to highlight is that, during the rediscovery in 2021, I believe it might have been early 2022, but I think it was 2021. The most of the tiles for Etheria had been unsold since 2015. Like this never really got popular until it was rediscovered, and then they finally got sold for, I think the claim price was 1 ETH, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, this like I was reading your Medium article, and one thing I thought was remarkable is that in the entire 1.2 map, there was only this small, like tiny island on the bottom left that was actually like claimed and interacted with. The rest was basically just, you know, left pristine, essentially.
Yeah, well, that was the 0.9, the
Oh,
first,
okay.
first
That's
version,
okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, that one, yeah, it was sort of just like a test version, and Cyrus had claimed those tiles, and then there's one tile that he farmed and built a structure on, and that was it. And in fact, across all four versions, in 2015, only 15 ended up having structures on them built using, the old method. And then it wasn't until 2021 that people started um, yeah, that there was this rediscovery of the project. So I think, I mean, in my opinion, the ones with the old structures are really special because it's sort of like
Yeah. For
you know.
sure. I would like after we've talked about this, I definitely would want to have one in my collection. I mean, again, there's enormous scarcity, and I would imagine it would be pretty tough to, if they're not owned by Cyrus, it would be by some pretty hardcore OGs. So I don't know if they'll ever hit the market.
Uh, yeah, those are those are really not you'd have to put in some work to get one of those. Not saying it's impossible, but yeah, not easy. Um, but yeah, there's more too, like just continuing on sort of
Yeah, sure.
the geeky building stuff because it's really fun when you dig into it. So like I said, you build these structures one block at a time, but there's and like I said, you can put them on the tile, you can never take them off the tile, you can move them around. Um, but then there's this other thing where every time you place a block, what it does is it goes and it scans, it looks to make sure like it has to make sure you're not placing it on another block. So it has to scan all the blocks that have been placed previously. And that takes a certain amount of work. It takes a certain amount of gas. Like
Oh
you're
yeah.
paying a fee to scan all those old blocks. So the bigger your structure gets, the more gas it will take to place a new block. And
Hmm.
eventually you run up against the block gas limit, which right now it's like 30 million gas, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And what's cool is there's at least one structure from back then where like the block gas limit was hit. Like a structure got built that was so big and involved so many blocks that if you were to try to place another block, you would always run out of gas. And so the structure becomes somewhat frozen, or at least like it can't be built upon
I,
anymore. Which is kind of fun because you've got this frozen structure, but then if they increase the block gas limit, which they're talking about doing now, then all of a sudden it becomes unfrozen and you can add a little more to your sculpture. Um, so that's just a really neat sort of geeky aspect of this
I
whole.
think it's I think it's really funny and kind of fascinating that, like you said, this is like you're really tinkering around with the beginnings of immutability in the sense where once you farm these blocks, you permanently own them, and once you place them, you're stuck with them being placed somewhere on your tile. So, if you really started building a bunch and then you ended up creating a mess, like the best you can do is just rearrange the blocks, but it's never going to be a pristine tile again, you know?
Yes, yeah. In my opinion, there's something really beautiful about that. Like
Yeah.
I love any project that where you have to make a decision and it's going to be permanent is like to me that always adds to a project because it creates this tension that's really neat. Um, and then there's another you know p- probably the most the most geeky part of the if this wasn't already geeky enough, the most geeky part of building is that if you look in the code there's there are these formulas to sort of delineate the building space. And you've got like you can see that like, oh, well, there's a rectangle I can build in, and then there's like triangles above and below it, and there's sort of formulas carving all that out. So you can see that, oh, this is supposed to be a hexagon, right? The a tile is shaped like a hexagon, and that's where I can build my stuff. And that's the only real way you can know that it's a hexagon. It doesn't say the word hexagon. You have to like look at the formulas and you say, oh, okay, it's a hexagon building area. But if you really look closely, you can see that the uh, the data type for the XY coordinate, it's a what is it? It's int 8, an 8-bit integer. So there's 256 different values it can take on. So it's kind of like it's 256 by 256, and you're trying to carve out a hexagon within that.
Okay.
But the formulas within the formulas, you end up like multiplying by 2 and 3, and something happens to where in the middle of the calculation, the numbers get so big that they roll over again.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
so it's like you're trying to carve out the area you can build in, but there's this rollover bug to where in the end, and you can see this picture in my Medium article, the actual building space is the tile plus these weird kind of triangle areas kind of outside of the tile.
Yeah,
just
I
to
saw
look at
that.
the bug. I love this. I think it's neat that there's like, yeah, I can build on my tile, and then there's extra dimensional, hidden building space just due to a kind of a bug in the code where I can build, secret structures or whatever. And it reminds me a lot of like the minus world in Super Mario Brothers, which is also due to like a rollover bug where it's like, oh, I can go to a level that I wasn't supposed to be able to go to. Um, I think like Cyrus says like it was like a mistake or and it is a mistake, but it's like it's one of those mistakes that actually makes the project cooler. And that was not fixed until version 1.2. When you get to 1.2, you can't build outside of your tile, but the first three you can. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun one.
Mhm. Um, so yeah, that was a lot on the old way of building, and of course,
Mhm.
as we were discussing, like people don't, it's clunky, and people don't
Oh,
build that way anymore. But it's also pretty neat that that exists.
well,
Just the,
I mean, it's another dimension that again, people don't really interact with now, but again, it's almost it's almost like a game type mechanics that were enabled through that, right? Um, it like there is the new tools that they have for that the renderer will display now in that name field. Like there's a voxelizer tool that allows you to basically you can take like image files and it'll help you kind of create either 2D or 3D like representations that you can then dump into Etheria and have it rendered. There's another tool too that I haven't actually used yet that has been on my to-do list. Another funny aside is when ChatGPT was first really blowing up a couple of years ago, I asked ChatGPT to create a particular structure, and ChatGPT was really kind of terrible back then. I mean, you could only output very like very small stuff where it wouldn't screw it up, and so I asked for this structure. Like I gave it the instructions for what Etheria's building expects in terms of dimensions and everything. And I plugged it in and then I plugged it into the renderer and it's almost like this weird like 3D like art project of just how weird and macabre isn't the right way to put it, but just almost like a Gen AI or a Gen art thing, like something you would expect out of art blocks, but except in like in 3 dimensions. It was really kind of funny.
yeah, yeah, that's cool.
But no, yeah, again, I thought it was interesting because most people aren't like there's not very much information about the old building mechanics and like the fact that you really dug in and were able to document that is really cool because again, people aren't really using that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a few tweets about this recently that I'm a big proponent on um, talking about EVM native art specifically. So art or creations that are specific to the Ethereum virtual machine or the world computer or whatever you call it. And I think that a true EVM creator, I think what did I say? I said they arrange opcodes, meaning that you're like on the blockchain, it's just a bunch of uh, codes for like pushing data around, and these codes form a computer program and they give rise to an experience, and that experience can involve ownership and building things and so on and so forth. Um, and like that's the art, is like putting the code in there to generate an experience that could not have existed prior to this world computer being created. And I think that's kind of a misconception in this NFT world. Like NFTs got to be known as like, well, they're pictures. They're JPEGs that you own on the blockchain and you trade them. And it's like thinking of it that way is just it feels very limiting. It's like, yeah, sure, you can take the world computer and you can stick pictures on them and you can trade them, but you can also do like millions of other things. You can create crazy kind of collective interactive experiences. And so I would like to keep pushing on that idea because I think that's really what's special about all this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's way more than just JPEGs that are possible. I mean, again, it's like you were saying, like this is kind of a great tech demo for what Ethereum is capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, right, right. It gives you a feel for what's really possible.
Yeah, restricting it like just go, like shrinking it down to JPEGs or DeFi is kind of depressing, you know?
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, just coming from a computer science background, to me, the whole world computer thing, I don't know. Some people don't like necessarily, they don't like that way of describing Ethereum or whatever. They think maybe it's bad branding. I don't know, but that gets me the most excited. Like a world computer. Like I've been thinking about computation for all this time, and this is like such a weird kind of computer. And there's some things you can do with it and some you can't. Like every step is really expensive, so there's certain like you have to be careful about what data you store there. And there's some things that are like impossible, like enforcing royalties with NFTs, right? Like
Mhm.
there's always a workaround because
Yeah.
there's too much ability to program it. Like, well, if I have to pay a royalty, I'll just stick it in a wrapper and I'll do this workaround where I don't have to pay royalties. So I just love it. I love the fact that it's this weird computer with all these properties and things, new things you can do and other things you can't do. And I don't know, that gets me excited.
Yeah, it's a you know, if you know, Ethereum really changed blockchains, you know, forever with when it launched. You know, again, having these uh, again moving into this like you know stateful computer that you know everyone can provably track the state and again pay like that's why like you know like you were talking about the, like using int 8 for some of those values like you know I'm sure that that would have been a lot more expensive to use like a floating point number or something so of course you would have used you know int 8 if you could get away with it right.
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course. There's a little bit of nostalgia for me, like because like I remember, like I'm an old computer guy, so like back in the old days with regular computers, you had to be careful about like, well, I don't have enough megabytes, or whatever. Yeah, I don't have enough space to do what I want to do, so I have to do pixel art and all this stuff. So yeah, it's very cool that like there's all these new constraints in the world computer that are like the old constraints that existed in regular computers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely fun. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, so the old building mechanic, it exists and it's out there, but it's kind of been um, well, I would say that the new method is kind of taken over for people like trying to just basically put out a build on their tiles. Trying to think of some of the other features that you might want to discuss. So we've talked about the building mechanics. Um,
Right.
you want to talk about how the initial distribution was done?
Yeah, so let's see. The way it started was you've got every tile. So the main data structure here is you've got a 33 by 33 two-dimensional array of tiles, and each tile has a bunch of fields like name, status, blocks, etc. And they have an elevation, uh, and they have their XY coordinate and so on. They also have an owner variable, and all those owner variables are set to the zero address at the beginning. And the way it works is you can pay 1 ETH if you pay 1 ETH, that goes to the creator address, and then you get your tile. If it was owned by the zero address, that means it was unclaimed. So you pay your 1 ETH, you get the tile. And there's in the code it says like if the elevation is under 125, it should fail. And that's how you define the water. So you've got like it's 33 by 33, but there's only 457 tiles with elevation above 125. And so those are the only ones that you can actually buy. So that's the land. And then the ones you can't buy are the water, or at least like we say that's water, but the word water, here's a another geeky fact. The word water didn't appear as a string in the bytecode until the last two versions. So in the last two versions, you know you're dealing with water. In the first two, there's just these tiles you can't buy. Are they lava? Are we in outer space? I don't know. It's probably water. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff I love about this project is just, what can we really know and what can't we know? So anyway, yeah, so there's land and then there is what is probably water. Um, and yeah, so that's the initial distribution. And I should probably get into like so having having a distribution mechanism to me that sort of makes it a real collectible. Like I think I defined in my article, I defined a collectible set to be a project where you have multiple distinct items and there is a limit imposed on them and also a way of distributing them. And that's how you get like a complete collectible set. And that's what Etheria is. And I and so Etheria 0.9, that's like contract number 2000 something. And I actually put in the work to manually walk through every single contract before that one to make sure there are no collectible sets on the blockchain on Ethereum before that one. So this is something that's really special about Etheria is that it really is the first collectible set, at least as far as I define a collectible set. And I proved it. And I've got a spreadsheet, and it's very tedious. And I decompiled like 2,000 contracts and manually read them, just to be sure that yeah, this one is the first one.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. I know with earlier projects, on different blockchains, they, again, it's different than having everything built into the smart contract and having, like you said, kind of a formalized way of, um, of distributing the collectibles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many other projects that get part of the way there, and that's fine. Like um there's pre-Etheria stuff that you can own on Ethereum. There's like coins, and there's even some things that kind of look like NFTs. And that's all fine. But I think yeah, there's something kind of special about having all those pieces together to where you can say like, oh yeah, this is definitely intended as a collectible set. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen some of your work on some of the other earlier contracts that are, like you said, like some of them are ownable with caveats or whatnot. But I don't think that like a reasonable person would argue um that Ethereum is the first uh what we would meaningfully consider an NFT by again layman's standards, right? You know?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's been so much debate about firsts and what's the first NFT and whatever, and arguably some of this was not in good
And
faith. Um,
yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say is like you can get like there's a lot of if you get super focused into the details, like maybe you can make a case on whatever you're particularly focused on. But I think most people, given the like given the data, would agree that this is what we would commonly consider an NFT, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, a distribution mechanism, a limit. Um, there it's completely trustless. You got these ownable items, so uh, yeah, it was made to be collected, and that's really cool. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think some of those early contracts, you have like the Ponzi mechanics like hard baked in. So I think those are more of just kind of like funny and interesting relics of the blockchain itself. Whereas, with the ones with the built-in Ponzi mechanics, I don't really consider that true ownership if there's if it's always for sale with, outside of your control, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for collecting all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I've always been sort of a hunter for like anything that's kind of interesting on Ethereum from those early years. In fact, like I love the King of the Ether token, which is um or not token, but King of the Ether crown. It's like this hot potato kind of thing from early 2016 where like you have the crown and then it's automatically on sale for like 50% more and then somebody buys it and then it goes on sale again. And it's just like a cool relic and
Yeah.
there's only one crown or there's a few different versions, but it's like there's a scarcity to it and everything. So I'm all for collecting all kinds of stuff, but you got to look at the relative prices of things and how special they are. I think like I talk about a lot of stuff, but the amount of stuff I'll pay a lot for is way different than that. And
Yeah,
really feel
exactly.
like I feel like until you have some Etheria and maybe some II coin, those are the things with the absolute earliest timestamps. Then maybe venture out and get some of the second tier, third tier stuff. But I don't know. Sometimes I see people jump right to the lower tier stuff, and I think, man, there's still deals on like the truly best stuff, the stuff with the great fundamentals. And so,
Yeah, I mean, I
mhm.
guess this would be a good point, a good time to bring it up. But I think one of the reasons that the Etheria hasn't been as popular as a lot of other collections is there was a lot of drama after the rediscovery with um, between Cyrus and some of the different people that were collecting and trading the earlier versions. For a while, the 1.1 was the earliest known version, and anyway, there was some drama there where uh, uh, how would I put that? So like, well, without going into the details, uh, uh, people were forced to use a different name to even refer to it, and it was not recognized by Cyrus as a official quote unquote project, and there was a lot of animosity there. So people were trading it as block plots at the time, and again, so 1.1 and the earlier versions weren't considered official. Etheria, and only 1.2 was considered official, and I don't know. I think a lot of that drama and animosity kind of um, fractured the early community and kind of stalled some of that momentum too.
Yeah, and I can see that, but I also think that we can have a fresh start and we can we can try again and look at it with fresh eyes because the reality is that Cyrus's role in this, I mean, it ended in 2015. He
Yeah,
deployed the contract and he purposely made it so that like once it's deployed, he can't do anything. Like that's
yeah,
it. It's just, everyone's on equal ground and they can claim the tiles and trade them and everything. So it's just it's a mistake to think that there's this just gets at the
yeah. I'm
certain.
just
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just highlighting that that's one of the reasons why it's not already more acknowledged, right? It's just that again, like I never cared that he didn't recognize 1.1 at the time. Like I wanted to buy one because that was the earliest that was known. So I was like, I don't care if he has a problem with it or not. That's what I want. So, yeah, to your point. But I was just explaining that that's I think one of the reasons why it's still a little bit under the radar is that that kind of blunted its popularity early on.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. And I guess I would say, yeah, people who have been in crypto and NFTs for a while are going to have certain biases based on their prior experiences. But what I try to think about is how are people going to see things? How are new people going to see things? Like if people start to get interested, people who aren't in crypto at all, they learn about blockchain, they learn about Ethereum, whatever, and they start like asking questions and sort of looking around at stuff, like how are they going to see it? And I do think that like people that see it with fresh eyes are gonna really value early timestamps because they're just not gonna be trusting of like you tell them a story of like this or that happened or this project had a bigger impact than this other one or this one has more cultural importance. It's like if you're new, you're like, I don't know, you might be lying to me, you know? But what I
Or
do know is I can check the timestamp.
yeah, or like that's what I keep asking myself too. Like, and when people talk about these like 2021 projects, like even art blocks and some of those other ones, like there's some of those I really like. Like I still own a Singularity, but like especially with PFPs and some of these art projects, like in on a bigger scale, like if you had to pick a gen art project, is ringers really the like the apex of generative art, or fidenzas, is that really the best that there ever will be? Or like why are it gets into an area where I don't like, it bleeds over into almost that like the traditional art world where it's more about like hype and insiders and marketing and like guerrilla marketing and stuff that I don't profess to be an expert in. I just know that, kind of to you, that like I understand timestamps and I understand some of these other technical achievements, that, you know, hey, anyone can create a new project and, right now in 2025, but you can't create a new 2015 timestamp.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. There can be projects that, art world people love and maybe they'll always love, like maybe people always love Xcopy or certain art blocks projects and that maybe they'll always go for a lot of money. And that's fine. But then there's a whole other world of like
Yeah.
relics with provably good fundamentals in terms of timestamp, in terms of functionality, and this and that. And we can coexist.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't understand the art world, so I'm not going to touch it because I don't understand it, and I understand this other stuff. So,
Yeah, that's my feeling too, is that there it's not just there's room for both. I think that they will both continue to exist. The space is more than big enough for it. I just choose to like focus on what I know and understand, rather than um again, like the trad art space is just outside of my expertise, so I don't pretend to be an expert in that stuff.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's exciting though is there was the traditional art kind of side kind of had its day, but like the relics haven't had their day yet. It's like it's still sitting there waiting. And yeah, it's easy for me to picture a lot of people getting excited about the stuff with the oldest timestamps. Like I don't know when it's going to happen next year, 5 years, 10 years, no idea, and I don't make any predictions, but at least I can imagine it.
Yeah, me too. Like, I'm terrible. I thought stuff would have already been turned around by now, but I just have a hard time imagining, in the future that some of these like early limited projects aren't going to be hard for the average person to get. Now what does that mean in terms of financially or whatever? I don't know. Like, I just don't think it'll be easy. I don't think it'll be a trivial decision for someone to think that they can just buy one of the less than 2,000 Etheria tiles, or 300 Nakamoto's, or whatever it is, right? I think it'll be increasingly difficult to do that in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm even delusional enough to think that there will be university departments someday that will have a fund where they'll acquire Etheria tiles or mooncats for their collection, and it'll be like a whole thing where there's these institutions that like put together money to acquire these things and then sort of use them for educational purposes. The same way you might uh,
Wow.
have a collection of old books like a Gutenberg Bible or
Well,
one of these.
I didn't even think about it that way. Also think about having that as like the computer science mascot, right? Being the and a like a mooncat that they own, or any other particular relic that they, yeah, that's really, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's kind of still a bit. It's kind of baffling to me. I mean, I kind of understand it, but I have interacted with a lot of computer scientists over the years, and a small fraction of them kind of get blockchain and they understand like, oh yeah, like they kind of understand NFTs and why that might be a special kind of thing. But there's a lot of people that have the technical knowledge to be able to understand it, but they kind of reject it. And I'm like, I don't know. It's interesting. I felt like it would be more people would be more excited about the idea of like old digital collectibles, especially like tech savvy people. But there's a stigma. There's this blockchain stigma where it's like certain people they're like, yeah, I can understand that, but I'm not touching that. Like I just don't want to think about it or something.
One thing I think plays into that though, Godish, is I think a lot of gamers and whatnot were just really burned by the monetization practices of the traditional gaming industry, even before Web3. Like, watching the rise of just how predatory they got in terms of like loot box mechanics and all this other stuff. So I think that kind of poisoned the receptivity, in a sense that I agree. I think it's a natural fit. I just think people are hyper skeptical of these new monetization slash ownership methods because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you look around and you see just like crazy gambling everywhere and scams and false claims of firstness everywhere you look. And it's like, do you really want to bother, sorting through all that to get to the good stuff? Yeah, many people don't want to.
Well, I mean, it's funny because it's easy for us to forget, but like, a lot of the newbies, their inroads into crypto is usually through some terrible means. Like you have these in quote unquote influencers like BitBoy, who I think he's in prison now, but like these people that just absolutely scam and rug the people that are looking to them for information or advice or whatnot. I mean, it's a treacherous road out there for people to kind of get their footing in the crypto space.
Yeah, absolutely treacherous, but what I always think is that the treacherous road is that's the road to massive gains on investments. Like you don't get your 100x unless you're willing to put up with some really terrible stuff, just interfaces that don't work, scams, people, calling you a criminal, like just like that, when you're really early to something really weird yeah, I mean it happens over and over again. Like I was there for the early days of the internet itself, like when it was a mess, it was like there was all kinds of pitfalls and traps and all kinds of BS websites that people were trying to promote and everything, but you just sort of
I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you could have written off the internet for, if you wanted to, for some of the like scandalous stuff that would go on the internet. I know, for a while, like one of the big, like now we have essentially with crypto. I think one of the neat things is that crypto and proof of work has basically created this natural financial incentive for forcing companies to secure their networks and their IT infrastructure, because otherwise they'll get instantly cracked and they will people will just start mining crypto on it, like and before it was the monetization method. I remember back in the day is that people would these hackers would hack company networks or websites or whatever, and they turned it into 0 day wares or porn websites or whatever, and make money off of their network and their computers. It's just like
Mhm. Mhm.
it's just
Yeah, yeah. It's the Wild West kind of
Yeah.
thing. Got to just deal with it. And
Yeah, definitely good times. But no, I think it I'm still really hyped about, the future for this stuff. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. But I guess before I kind of ramble on, like, so we covered the building mechanics and the distribution. Is there anything else technically you want to dive into on Ethereum?
um, let's see. Yeah, we got into most. We covered most of the stuff. Well, I guess there's kind of unlimited stuff. Maybe we the only other major thing we didn't cover is like the differences between the versions, and that's a
Okay.
good one because uh they they they're they're the same in a sense that like you have the same map and you get a tile and you can name it, you can update its status, you can build on it. Okay. So then what's the difference among these versions? So you got version 0.9, which was the first one, and that was sort of like I said before, that was kind of like the test version, and only a few tiles were claimed, and only a little bit of building was done. Then I think a week after that, version 1.0 was rolled out, and this is the first one that was actually like announced. I think it was announced on Reddit, and so there were actual like there was more activity. I think there's five or so builds and maybe more tiles were farmed. And in terms of functionality, there were like a couple changes. I'm trying to remember. Um, Something was changed with the status updates, and but not much. There wasn't much technically that was changed from 0.1 to 1.0. But 1.0 then definitely had more. There were more users, and then pretty soon after that. Um, 1.1 was rolled out, and that's where um there were some more major changes, and I would say both good and bad. So, as I mentioned before, as the building became more predictable because it wasn't pseudo random anymore, it was
Mhm.
something like you could pick the blocks that you wanted to build with, and you can see if you look at the old builds on the later two versions, you can see that like uh, they're they're better because like the builders were able to choose their own blocks, and so
Yeah, that makes
more
sense.
elaborate. So there's that, a few minor changes, but then there was this really big change, which was it was kind of a mistake. It was that using tx.origin instead of message.sender for checking who owns the tile. So basically, I won't get into all the technical details, but what happened was uh, when you go from 1.0 to 1.1, you can no longer like hold your tile in a contract. Okay, so there's sort of regular addresses like where you just have the key and it's a regular what's it called? Externally owned address. And then there's like putting your tile in a contract where there's like additional functionality and things you can do with it. Um, and just due to sort of a technical glitch, when you go to 1.1 and 1.2, you at that like the way it's made, like you can only hold your tile in a EOA. You can't hold it in a contract. And so like a lot of functionality was lost there. So when you put your tile in a contract, it means you can do things with it programmatically. Like you could build a
Okay.
game on top of it and have like if you win the game, you automatically farm your tile or something like that. Or for example, you could give your tile to a DAO. A DAO would be like a multi-sig smart contract kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or a tile could be a prize that you win or something like that. So unfortunately, like going from version 1.0 to 1.1, there was this sort of we lost some of that functionality. So you can still own your tile, you can build stuff on it, name it, you can interact with it, but you can't like I guess I'd say like you can't extend it. Like you can't
Yeah.
create games and create other experiences on top of it. And I think that functionality, it might be able to bring we might be able to bring some of that functionality back. There might be like a partial fix, but I don't think there's ever going to be a total fix for that. So that it is important for people to understand that. Even though, all of it's a perfectly fine collectible, no matter what version you have.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting caveat. You know, yeah, I mean again, uh, I think you have to appreciate them for what they are at the time, even with the the trade-offs that there are with the different versions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like a case can be made for, I guess version 1.2 was the one that was presented at DevCon 1, and it was the one that was considered official for like 6 years or whatever. And so I could see that counting for a lot to people. Like despite, whatever technical glitches there are, it's like, well, this was the official one. This is the one that everyone used for several years. So there's going to be there's a lot of different opinions on this. Like I mean personally, I like 0.9 just because it's like the first and it's just like dead simple. It's like, well, there was no working Etheria and then suddenly there was, and I like that. But I can see other people having different points of view on it, and I think that's all great. And but most important is that everybody understands the technical details here, and there isn't like any confusion about like what's possible with each version. And as long as everyone's clear on all that, I'm totally cool with obviously people liking whatever they like.
I think in terms of as a collector, I think like what will end up happening is I think there'll be a premium for zero point 0.9 and 1.2. I there as a collector, that's how I looked at it is that I want to own it's like the very first like real quote unquote NFT on Ethereum. I think that's super rad. And the fact it's a version of Ethereum I mean, Etheria is even better, right? And then, 1.2 for the fact that, like you said, it's kind of it was the first one I became aware of, and it had the most OG usage and was, presented at DEF CON is really cool. So yeah, there were a ton more builds on 1.2 back in the day than the earlier versions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a fair way of looking at it. Um,
But like
and
you said, I mean, there's no right or wrong. I mean, it's all up to, again, this gets back to like what makes, these collectibles like great is that, no one's forcing you to do anything, and you can like have your own preferences for anything, right? As long as you understand, as long as you understand technically what you're getting, I don't, everyone's free to love and do whatever they want.
yeah, absolutely. And it's very understandable why it takes a while for people to sort of come around to Etheria for a lot of reasons, and one of them being that there's all these different versions and they all have different technical details and stuff. I can completely understand why this is all hard to untangle, and I hope that I've, through what I've written, my article and threads, and talking to you, I hope that I've like taken a few steps forward in terms of like helping people untangle all this. That's
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely include in the description links to your Medium article and your Twitter. You have like a master thread of threads on Twitter. I'll link to that as well as your Twitter account. And yeah, I like the work you've done is really cool. Again, like it's it's an important project, but until you started really kind of putting out your work, it wasn't really easy to get much of the information outside of that one big thread that Cyrus put out a while ago. So it's just I don't know, it's interesting that like the more information that's out there, the better.
yeah, and I love discussing it. And if anyone wants to ever ask me questions about technical details of Etheria or really any Ethereum NFTs, it's always a joy to talk about this stuff and answer questions.
We're a bunch of nerds, so
Of course.
right. So no, it's been a lot of fun. I again I learned some more about the building mechanics talking to you. Again, I think it's remarkable how that was almost like a mini game within within Etheria back then, you know.
Uh, yeah, yeah. It was fun. It was fun. Like I said, there's 15 early builds, and it was fun learning more about them because you can't even see them all if you go to the Etheria.world site.
Oh,
Like some of them even have like new builds like in their place.
oh,
Full
superimposed.
build is kind of like it's hidden.
Oh, I
And
see.
what I did at one point, you may have seen this thread. I did a thread of like where I actually made an animation of the building process of all 15. Uh,
Yeah.
so that like just to clarify and just to show everyone that like okay, these are the 15. This is the exact sequence of steps that uh took place for it to be for these to be built. So that was a lot of fun doing
I
it.
guess one other thing just occurred to me to point out too is that one thing that makes Etheria, definitely a like a fun NFT project slash crypto collectible, however you want to name it, right? Is that you have a lot of diversity in terms of like you said, you could focus on early builds, or you could focus on location on the map, or tile types. Like I don't think we dove into like the types of tiles. There's depicted on the at least on the map, they're depicted as like grass or sand or ice or mountain. I mean, I don't know. There's just a lot like there's a lot of different things that you can really geek out on and kind of focus on what really calls out to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've spent way more time thinking about this project than any other project. I mean, second to this is only Mooncats, and that's kind of like a far second in terms of time spent.
Yeah, well, it'll be, I again, I think it'll be interesting to see where we're at in another, what is it, 3, 5, 10 years, and see if we were right that, these are going to be, much more desirable than they are right now or not. We could definitely be wrong. We're going to
Mhm.
be the only nerds that care. I just have a hard time imagining that.
Uh, yeah, we'll see. I've learned not to spend too much time sweating about the future and just kind of
Yeah, I know, right?
get what I've collected and just say like, well, if this is it, then this is it, you know?
But no, it's definitely cool. I'm also glad that there was never any um like never any like follow-on projects or anything else that like Etheria, as we can commonly just say Etheria is a 2015 project. It would have been a lot messier if there were like follow-on projects or whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Don't need any more messiness for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, four working contracts is enough. So, but no, is there anything else you wanted to cover or anything else you wanted to discuss?
Um, no, I mean that's basically it. Like I just want to emphasize again that I think this is a big deal. I think the invention of the world computer is a massive breakthrough. I think building a metaverse on the world computer within the first few months is a huge breakthrough. And yeah, it's just I'm hoping that in the future people when all the noise dies down and everything, I hope people are able to look at something like this and feel the sense of awe that I feel. Like, wow, this is special. This was something that was truly new, and we'll see. But it's definitely a feeling that I have.
Yeah, likewise. I again, I have that same feeling when I think about Ethereum and how early it is in context of the technology. And I guess the other thing is like you were saying, Ethereum being I mean, Ethereum Ethereum being the first smart contract chain, to deploy the EVM. Like even if Ethereum doesn't end up being the like what ends up being the biggest, chain on the in terms of utilization, even if it gets, overtaken by a different competitor, whether it's going to be Solana or something else. I think the the historic, um, you know, the historic nature of both Ethereum and Etheria are going to, stand the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, if I do worry a little bit about Ethereum, the blockchain, and I think it needs to stay alive. It needs to still be, a major blockchain, whatever that means. And most importantly, needs to stay secure,
Yeah.
because that is the universe, for all of these relics. The Ethereum relics live in the universe of Ethereum, and it can't just kind of limp along as a dud. It has to be something. It has to be major enough. But as long as it's there and it's chugging along and doing something in the world, then these relics will always be first, and that's something you can't change. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me about this and your expertise in the subject. It's definitely a fun topic for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a pleasure. Yeah, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to talk to you.